As Dara mentioned, my name is Eric Setzler. I'm Chief Engineer for the city in the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. We're here today. Well, first we're coming to you online, of course, which is a little bit new for all of us with the restrictions in place due to COVID-19. Some of you may have already been involved in some online meetings. I think we're all getting a little better at it, but it still is a new endeavor for many of us. And we'd love to do it in person, but that's just not possible right now. So we hope that this is the next best thing. I do have the presentation up, so if everything is working correctly, you will be able to see the presentation on your screen. So this obviously is a presentation to talk about the Allegheny Circle two-way conversion project. I have a brief agenda here. We'll just start back at the beginning and talk about the project briefly, some of the goals, the funding, and then we'll step through some of the various design elements and improvements that are part of the project. Many of you have heard about many of these things in the past. Obviously, it's been a long time that we've been working on this project, and we are excited that we are right down here now. We're looking at construction being coming up soon here. So we will talk about the construction schedule a bit, and that'll kind of round out the presentation portion of it. And then we will let it open it up for questions. We have a relatively big group, but I think that hopefully we'll have time that we can, give everybody an opportunity to get a chance to speak if they so wish. So stepping back, of course, as many of you know, this project has been developing for a long time now. We did what we're calling phase one that was completed in September of 2017. That was always viewed as an interim phase. We basically took the four-lane one-way roadway and cut it down to 2 travel lanes with parking on the outside and a 2-way cycle track on the inside. So that's been the condition for the last, I guess we're getting close to 3 years now. And during that time, we've been working on the phase 2 part of the project, which is what we are wrapping up at this point. And as many of you know, we're going to be converting it, instead of 2 travel lanes in one direction, we'll be converting it to 1 travel lane in each direction. So this will be going back to a 2-directional roadway. Currently, the islands have the intersections have islands to kind of have like these slip ramps that kind of get you in and out of the circle. We'll be reconfiguring those intersections to improve pedestrian and bike and traffic safety, vehicular traffic safety, upgrading the traffic signals at all the intersections, both to accommodate the 2-direction vehicles, but also at the same time to improve safety for pedestrians and bikes as well. Improving the bike connections into and out of the circle, and making some additional improvements to the cycle track. All the pavement markings, of course, and signage will be replaced to bring it up to standard and to make it work for the new roadway circulation patterns. And then construction, we're now looking that we'll be bidding it out this fall and having construction start very early in 2021, in the late winter. And I'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through the presentation here. So we have a rendering here where we've kind of superimposed our design on an aerial image, and we've added some color coding to help call out detail to the various uses of the roadway. The yellow is the actual vehicular drive lanes. So we have 1 lane in each direction. Parking is designated in orange on the outside. The cycle track is in green on the inside. in a dark green is bike lane, so coming in and out of the circle. And I'll talk about the intersection design a little bit more in a future slide. But one of the things, currently the cycle track exists, but getting into and out of the cycle track can be a little tough at many of the intersections. So we will be, a lot of effort here is bringing a cycle track, or a bike lane from the side street and bringing it through the intersection in a safe manner and getting it into the cycle track, which then goes around the commons. And sidewalk improvements are highlighted in blue. Of course, sidewalks exist already around the road, but we will be, especially at the intersections, we will be adding bump outs to shorten crossing distances and make pedestrians more visible as they cross the street. This is the northern half of the project, and the southern half is shown here. The intersections, it's the same basic design concept at each of the intersections as far as the bump outs and getting the bike lanes across. And as I say, we do go into a little more detail on future slides here. So as far as the project goals, we are focusing on multimodal transportation investments, which of course multimodal being more than just cars, although cars are still a very important user of this road, but also looking at bicycles and looking at pedestrians, and being responsive to the needs of all of those users, and really treating them all equally as when looking at giving them a safe space to operate in these streets. And we're trying to be supportive of community planning goals. One of the big impetuses here was to restore the neighborhood scale. Certainly, as the street was created with 4 lanes in a one direction, with kind of like the slip ramps coming in and out at the intersections, it had very much a highway feel. And one of our goals here is to make it feel more a neighborhood street as opposed to a highway. As I said, a little bit of this is repeating, but we're doing a bi-directional travel corridor to create a neighborhood scale street. Eliminating the outer vehicular travel lane will minimize the potential conflicts at the bus stops. The bump outs to shorten crossing distances for pedestrians and bikes and give them better visibility, which will improve safety. Maintaining and improving the cycle track that was installed during phase 1, and connecting to the on-street bicycle facilities in the larger network to improve mobility and safety. Just briefly on the funding side, design was funded as about $500,000 total, funded through various city sources, the bond and the pay-as-you-go money, and then some community development block grant money, which is federal money, but that comes to the city that we can use in certain areas of the city. The construction cost is just over $3 million. That's broken out. Approximately 50% of our funding is coming from federal sources. We have two grants that are going towards this project. One is from the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission, a smart transportation grant, and the other one is from PennDOT's Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program, which is a grant that puts money towards projects that reduce or improve air quality, I should say. So those are the two sources of federal funding, and then the remainder is coming from city, primarily bond money and a little bit more CDBG money. Okay, so I'll dive down a little bit more into the intersection improvements. This is an example. This is North Federal Street and North Common, so at the top of the circle, if you will. As you can see in the existing intersection picture, we have this concrete island in the middle, and the incoming and exiting lanes are built kind of at a large radius, which encourages vehicles to move into and out of the circle very easily, and also at a higher rate of speed, which is good for moving vehicles through quickly, but not necessarily for promoting safety of all users. So we'll be removing those center islands. We're going to tee up the intersection so the cars coming in will come up to a more standard intersection and make a right turn or make a left turn. This is occurring at all the 5 major intersections on the circle, at North Federal Street and North Commons, East Commons and East Ohio, Sandusky and Stockton, South Commons and South Federal, and then West Commons and Ridge Avenue. So those are the 5 main intersections that are currently signalized, and they will remain signalized in this plan. This little blow up of the intersection shows some of the details where the bike lanes coming into and out of the circle will go behind a concrete curb. So this is the protected intersection. The blue is all like sidewalk or raised area, so there's curb out here. And basically the vehicles stop back here at the stop bar if there's a red light. The bikes would stop, but then they also would be able to come up to this. They're still fully protected until they get to this point. At this point, they're pretty far ahead of cars that are back here. So the bikes and the pedestrians would both be in a place of higher visibility as they start to cross the street. Also, they have a much shorter crossing distance to get across, as opposed to the cars, which have to start back here. So I guess that's kind of just a summary of one intersection. As I say, most of the intersections have a similar design philosophy, but showing the ways that we are trying to improve safety and visibility for the pedestrians and bikes. And also noted down here, at some places where appropriate, we will have leading pedestrian intervals, which is where the pedestrians get a walk sign before the vehicles can start moving, just to give them a little head start so they can establish themselves in the intersection, once again, just to improve their visibility. So discussing parking a bit, this project will reduce parking from the what's out there today, and there's a couple reasons for that. This slide and the next slide show existing parking highlighted in green and proposed parking highlighted in orange. One thing you will see is that on the corners, we will not have parking on the corners. The reason for this, and you can kind of see it in the picture, is we are widening the lanes as you go through the corner. And so we're taking up some of that space on the outside that would have previously been like the 4th travel lane. Because these corners are relatively tight, the purpose of widening the lane is to ensure that all of our design vehicles, including buses, can navigate the turn while staying within their own lane. Of course, as we have opposing traffic now, we don't want anyone, drifting across the line, the yellow line on a curve. So that is why the travel lane is widened out a little bit going through the corner. Now this is the south half of the circle, and as you will see here, there is some existing parking highlighted in green. There is not any proposed parking highlighted in orange. The reason for that is because we are using the space down here to provide turn lanes. We have, you can see between Federal and South Commons, and then going up to East Commons, we have some turn lanes provided. And then over here on West Commons and South Commons, we have some turn lanes, some left turn lanes to get into the Nova Place parking garage. This was a result of looking at our traffic modeling. and attempting to balance the needs of all of our users. And coming up Federal and heading over to East, this is a fairly major movement. There's a lot of vehicles going in that direction and in the reverse under the new conditions here. So providing these left turn lanes allows that traffic to minimize the queuing potential as much as possible. And of course, we have a very large parking garage here, which supports, all the great things going on at Nova Place. There's a lot of new activity, which is causing this garage to be used again, where for many years, I think it was pretty underutilized. But of course, there's a lot of folks getting into and out of that garage. So these left turn lanes will help facilitate that and reduce backups that could back up through traffic. So we've had to make some trade-offs here. Of course, we've lost some on-street parking, but part of that is in service of providing good access to the off-street parking. This is a summary in tabular form, and this presentation will be posted. So if you want to dive into these numbers, further, the information will be available. But we are taking out a fair number of parking spaces, which is it's all trade-off, and especially on the south half of the circle, we're taking out a lot in order to provide access to the off-street spaces and just make sure that traffic is still going to operate at an acceptable level. I think I jumped the gun on talking about this one. So I just have highlighted here on West Commons and South Commons, highlighted in red are some left turn lanes, which will provide access into the garage and allow a place for people who are trying to turn into the garage. It will provide a little bit of space for them to queue up while they're waiting to make that turn, so that they're reducing impacts to the traffic that's just going through. So part of this, again, is to improve the connections. In my experience using this now is that the cycle track around the commons is great, but it can be a little tough to get into and out of it to connect on to other destinations in the city. So, I already talked about the protected intersection design to make those movements as safe as possible. And we will be extending our bike lanes out a bit to tie in along North Federal Street. They'll be tying into the bike lanes that we have striped there, that going up to North Avenue. East Ohio Street, I believe they stretch out to Cedar Avenue. South Federal, we are working to bring the bike lanes down to tie into the bike lanes at the Clemente Bridge, which of course then gets you over down both to the trail on the North Shore, but also down into downtown, to the bike lanes there and to points beyond. We are in discussions with the teams, PNC and the Pirates and the Steelers, to make sure that our plans there mesh okay with their uses, particularly around game days and the various events that they have going on. And then over on Ridge Avenue, just tying into the bike lanes that are there. And of course, we concurrently have the West Ohio Street Bridge Replacement Project going on, which I'm sure many of you know is finally underway now. So when both projects are done, that will all tie together through that corridor. Stepping out just a bit here, this is a clip from our Bike Plus plan, which was released last month. It's of course our first update from to the plan that was originally done 20 years ago. And this plan we're really excited about, and I'm sure many of you have heard about it through other meetings and may have looked it up yourself, but we have a goal to build another, I believe it's 120 miles over the next 10 years. So this is one little portion of it, but you know, really connecting the network and being able to get, you know, wherever you're trying to go, commuting on a bike and providing a good connected network to get there. The purple dashed lines are part of the proposed network that's shown in the Bike Plus plan. So this will be connecting into those, and as we're able to build out some of that infrastructure, it'll be able to tie in through Allegheny Commons here and provide some good, hopefully some seamless connections. This is just some renderings or a picture and a rendering just to illustrate a little bit about pedestrian improvements. This is not a picture of our project, but it illustrates the purpose, it illustrates our concept as far as having a bump out in order to decrease the crossing distance. We are specifying the piano key or the continental style crosswalks that have the large white bars, which are higher visibility, so that improves pedestrian crossing safety as well. We decrease the distance, and then, as I said, where appropriate, we are providing leading pedestrian intervals on the traffic signals, so that lets the pedestrian get out there ahead of the vehicles and establish their position in the street. There are also some new crosswalks that we're showing at various locations. So here, once again, I'm looking at the top half of the circle and showing existing crosswalks in blue and proposed in orange. If you are on a phone or a smaller device, this might be a little bit hard to see. But hopefully you can see the locations, and let's say you can pull this up afterwards if you want to zoom in a little more. But you know, at the intersections, at the main intersections, we'll have crossings at all quadrants. Over here, we are adding a crosswalk on North Commons near the northwest corner of the circle. This is to improve safety for students crossing. This is Allegheny Traditional Academy right over here. So we'll be adding a crosswalk here. You know, this cross on the corner, we really don't want to encourage crossing on a corner because the visibility is not as good. So we're providing it over here at the on the straightaway. On the southern half here, another new one that you'll see is over here. This is the southern half of Children's Way. So this connects over across the commons here. This will be particularly useful for people who may be going to the Children's Museum or just going to the park areas in here. You know, you still, of course, have the option of crossing up at Ridge Avenue at the intersection, at the signal there. But also there will be a crosswalk here if this path suits you better and you feel comfortable. We're providing that there. And then down here, this is a little bit of a crazy intersection at Sandusky and Stockton, but we will be providing crosswalks to support all the various movements that might be occurring at that location. Discussing the schools briefly, Allegheny Traditional Academy, which of course I pointed out was at the northwest corner of the circle. We are including school speed zone signs that are flashing the lighted signs. So we'll have to change that since now we have two-way operation. So we will be installing signs to handle traffic coming in both directions. I mentioned the crosswalk that we're adding there, and we are prohibiting loading on the corner since we are widening out the lanes to ensure that vehicles can pass each other safely as they go around the circle. There is not space there to have buses queuing up right around the corner. We are in active discussions with PPS and the school about how we're going to accommodate the bus loading. We don't have the final plan here for presentation, but we are in active discussions with them to make sure that we're doing something that is going to accommodate them and work for them while simultaneously allowing us to improve the operations and the safety on the circle. And we have heard a lot about enforcement, and DOMI has monthly coordination meetings with the police, and we're going to be working with them to really try to encourage good pickup and drop off behavior, utilizing the crosswalk, not darting across the street in other locations, following parking regulations, and all kinds of things like that. Also, the King School is on the circle, and this two-way conversion will not affect their bus loading and unloading at the King School. So I believe they're using one of the side streets there. So getting into anticipated construction schedule. The way this works is as our designer is finalizing our construction plans to submit our PS&E package, which is the plans, specifications, and estimate package, which we have and is currently being reviewed both by the city and by PennDOT. We come up with an anticipated construction schedule, and that allows us to set the duration and make sure, one, that we're giving the contractor the right amount of time, but not too much time, and also look at seasons and when things are happening and make sure it's all going to come together. So based on that schedule, we are going to so the project, what's not shown on this slide, the project will be going out to bid this fall, which will allow us to get under contract with the contractor, and the contractor can start, ordering their materials and things to be ready. And we actually are having them kicking off early, probably a little earlier than most construction typically starts in Western Pennsylvania. So we're showing them starting in February, and then basically working their way around. We have the 5 major intersections, which is really where the vast majority of the work is focused, especially the hard construction, removing islands, building islands, replacing sidewalks, improving, replacing traffic signals. That the bulk of the work is really focused at these 5 intersections. Of course, the line striping and the signage happens throughout the circle, but that's a relatively quick operation, and isn't, it's the hard construction that has more of the traffic impacts. We do show on here some schedules. As our consultant developed the design schedule, they have to make assumptions about where we're working, and so we show, for example, February through March at West Commons and Ridge Avenue, then moving to North Commons and North Federal, March through May, and on. And this could change, and we will, of course, be providing updates as construction actually happens. The contractor is allowed to submit to us for approval their proposed construction schedule, as long as it follows the constraints that we've provided in the contract. One of the major constraints that we are providing is that they cannot work on 2 adjacent intersections simultaneously. So they could work on 2 locations at the same time, but they would have to be separate. For example, they could work on North Commons and North Federal and South Commons and South Federal, but not West Commons and Ridge Avenue. The purpose of that restriction is to just give a little space between the work zones, so that we don't have confusing traffic patterns coming into, into one lane restriction and going directly into another one. So we're have a little space to keep things as safe as possible. Our initial draft schedule here showed the whole project wrapping up at the end, basically at the end of 2021, with the actual change to two-way traffic happening in January, like right after the new year. We're going to look at this again and see if, working under the assumption that they can work at two locations at once. We're going to try to compress this a little bit. I'd really like to see if we can get it done before the holidays. That would be my goal. So we're looking at that right now as we finalize the PS&E package. As I said, once this is the tentative construction schedule, and we will of course be disseminating information as things as the contractor gets underway, submits his actual construction schedule, and make sure we're getting the word out in advance of any lane restrictions happening, so that people can be prepared and take other routes and or just be prepared as needed. As Dara mentioned at the beginning, this project is on our dummy website. The link is here, and there will be a comment form there. If there's something that that we don't have time perhaps to discuss it during this meeting, or if you would just feel more comfortable providing the comment that way as opposed to through this meeting, or if you have any friends or neighbors who are not able to attend this meeting, you or they can go onto the website at that link and submit your comments there. So that ends the formal presentation portion of this. It looks like some comments have been coming in as we've been talking through the chat feature, and I think I'm going to exit out of this and turn it back over to Dara, and we can start diving into some questions and answers.
Sure. Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you.
I seem to be somewhere. Okay, let me just pull up the beginning of the chat and we'll start from the top, and we'll just make our way through the questions as we go along. So how are the bump out intersections treated so it's not a large expanse of pavement, and are we incorporating stormwater management?
So basically, the we're kind of, for the most part, we're trading area. The bump outs are concrete, but we're taking area that used to be lanes and converting it into bump outs or more sidewalk area. And as far as stormwater management goes, really the system's going to function much the same way that it does today. No significant changes there. So we're making some great adjustments to inlets and catch basins to make sure that they still will accept the flows, but there's not like a great change in the amount of runoff or anything like that as part of the project.
Okay. Will the cycle track be protected with anything stronger than the plastic barricades there now? Can we get a curb or planters?
Good question. So we are replacing the current bollards or flex posts that are there. We'll be providing them continuously the whole way around, and they're going to be a little bit of a beefier variety, which we hope will have better longevity and hold up a little better just to the daily wear and tear. At this point, we're not planning to put like a planter or anything. I don't think that we have enough room to do a planter but we are using a beefier, I guess that's what I call it, a beefier flex post design, which should be a little more durable.
There's been quite a few questions about construction coordination with the Clemente Bridge or the promenade. So if you could just speak to a little bit of our, internal coordination, construction mitigation kind of efforts.
Sure. So obviously we're coordinating with our own project over on the West Ohio Street area, the West Ohio Street Bridge project, and the North Promenade project. We've been in conversations with the Parks Conservancy, looking at their designs and our designs. The majority of that construction will not be on the street, so we do have certainly requirements in the contract requiring our contractor to coordinate with any adjacent project, and we'll be reviewing the maintenance and protection of traffic plans to make sure that it all works together and is coordinated.
Nick was asking about using the LPIs for bikes as well.
Hey, Eric, want me to take this one?
Yeah, Mike, if you could, that'd be great.
Sure. Hey, I'm Mike Malak. I'm a project manager at the city of Pittsburgh. Signalizing and signing how bikes basically get into and out of the circle, we spent a lot of time going back and forth on that one. And so the options that were boiled down to were bike signals, bikes use vehicular signals, bikes use pedestrian signals. So during my field view back in January, I stood where I thought cyclists had the best sight lines. And so I didn't want to use the pedestrian signals. So typically we could put up a bikes use pedestrian signal sign. So that way that's their signal they follow. The sight lines, and I think intuition also makes it easier for cyclists to use vehicular signals. In which case, yeah, the benefit of the leading pedestrian interval is not realized. What I will say is that by nature of the design of the protected intersections, cyclists will be pushed ahead of vehicles, and so they will have a better starting point to complete their crossing movement, and so they might not receive the benefit of the timed LPI, they will still receive the benefit of positioning with regards to concurrent traffic.
Thanks, Mike. Bob asked if it would make more sense to start construction on the South Commons during the off season of the Pirates, and kind of work our way around the circle from there.
That's a really good comment, and we are having additional coordination meetings with the Pirates and the Steelers as well as we get closer to construction. So that's a good comment and something that we will discuss with them too the next time we have a coordination meeting to make sure that we're minimizing the impacts as much as we can.
Okay. John writes, the cycle track was placed on the inside of the circle because the existing islands at the intersections prevented it from continuing around the outside of the circle. With the removal of those islands, can the cycle track be moved to the outside of the circle? Then it would be parking protected to increase safety of cyclists in sections where parking will remain as proposed. Moving the track to the outside will also eliminate 8 bike crossings, 2 at each of the intersections.
This is something that we have considered, and we settled on keeping it on the inside as the best solution. To get in and out, you do have to go through the protected intersections to get into the cycle track. But if you're a user that's continuing through an intersection, if you're going halfway around the circle or 2 or 3/4 or whatever, once you're in there, then you don't have to cross those other streets because you're on the inside away from the intersection. So there are some trade-offs in both sides, but looking at everything, we decided that keeping it on the inside of the circle was the best, and that's how we've done the design.
Renee asked where the bus stops are going to be.
I believe at this time we are not moving the bus stops. And I'm gonna have to clarify that in our response, unless anyone else on the call knows the answer.
Yeah, I think that Darcy from the Port Authority would like us to, in our follow-up, to have a similar rendering to the ones that we had that specifically identifies the transit stop. So we can certainly include that as part of the follow-up to this meeting.
Yeah. Eric, it's Corinne. At this time, we're not moving the bus stops.
Thanks.
Donna had asked if the protected bike lanes are going to be maintained during construction.
Yes, overall, yes. There could be some periods of time, if we are replacing a curb ramp adjacent to the cycle track, that we would need to close a little bit of it there to have space to do that work. Those would be more shorter duration things and limited to the absolute minimum amount of time necessary. So we won't be just like closing the entire cycle track throughout construction or anything like that.
We have 2 more questions about the bike lanes. How will the illegal parking be prevented? And I don't know if anyone from the Port Authority wants to chime in on this, but Eric had asked if the Port Authority had any intention to start running buses going counterclockwise on the circle once construction is complete.
I'll tackle the first part about the bike lanes. Certainly people parking in bike lanes or using bike lanes as loading zones has been a struggle for us all across the city. We are including the beefier flex posts all around the cycle track here, all around the circle. We hope that will help to a degree. There are still naturally going to be places where someone can squeeze a car in there. So some of that is just through enforcement and hopefully, enough enforcement and education, and we can try to reduce that. So we think it'll be better. It probably won't be perfect, but we're hoping to eliminate that as best we can.
This is Darcy at Port Authority. I'd be glad to answer the second question about rerouting transit service. At this time, Port Authority does not have any plans to reroute in the clockwise direction. Reason being that that side of the road would not allow for a safe place for anyone to get on or off of the bus because it would be directly adjacent to where the bike lanes are. So it's the preferred circulation would be to circulate in the existing location where we can pull directly to the curb and safely alight passengers from the sidewalk to the bus.
Great. Thanks, Darcy. And Bill notes that the piano key crosswalks are very slippery when they're wet, and that he would prefer something that's non-skid, make it a little bit easier for someone with some mobility challenges to cross the street.
That's something, that's a good comment. I'll take that back to our staff and see if there's anything with material that we can or should be doing differently to ensure that it's not slippery.
And Bill's follow-up question is, there's going to be a bump out on the bus stop at West Commons. This is better for boarding the bus with a disability when a bus can pull up and remain straight. The stop cars from parking beyond and stop cars from parking beyond that.
Yes, and I believe that is, we're providing space there. I know that's certainly a priority of the Port Authority as well, to be able to pull directly up to the curb, which makes the loading and unloading of the bus easy and safe. So yes, we will be accommodating that.
Okay, and I think that Chris Prisk has a question that he would like to ask.
Hey Eric, how's it going?
Good.
If you could pull up that one graphic that showed West Commons, South Commons in the access for Northe and the parking restrictions. I don't know if you're able to do that real quick, and then I could kind of speak to, I have two questions, but the graphic would help.
I think I can. Let's see here. Are we looking for the one that's a little closer in with the parking,
Yes.
or the turn lanes, I should say? Would this one work?
Perfect. Currently, right now, the existing parking on West Commons, the meters, kiosks, don't match up with the physical signage that's in place.
Okay.
So for example, on Sunday, the kiosks say, you know, it's free parking, enjoy, City of Pittsburgh. Whereas the hard signage says no parking, I believe, Sunday after 1 p.m. perhaps. And so there's been some issues with ticketing or non-ticketing illegally parked vehicles because the kiosks don't accurately reflect what the signage is. I was hoping that could be addressed in the interim, and then assuming this goes forward as proposed and there's no parking there, everything will be fine. If for some reason there's modifications and parking along that stretch remains, we'd have the kiosk issue already taken care of.
Okay.
That's the first question. Does that make sense?
It does, right. And as you said, this project will probably make it a bit of a moot point, but that's still a little ways off. We'll have to look in, we'll have to check in with, I think, because it probably has to do with the parking authority and what their meters say. So we can reach out to them and see if there's a way to resolve that conflict in the interim.
Excellent, that would be helpful. And then the second question, you actually might have to pull up a different slide that shows the two Northe Place garage. Oh, perfect, just zoom out a little bit there. Currently, I believe event access to Northe Place garage is on the eastern curb cut, kind of where your cursor is right now. And so if that remains in the future, that would be problematic for event access because you don't have the left turn lane there. So I'm not sure if you've had discussions with Northe Place to kind of change their operations and have event access from West Commons, where you have left turn lanes, or the South Commons portion to the west, where you have that other curb cut.
Yeah, we've had a number of conversations with Pharos regarding the operations of the garage and ingress and egress. I'm not sure if, I don't think most of them focused on game day operations specifically, but we certainly have discussed overall operations with them. I think I may have seen that Brad from Pharos is on. I don't know if Brad, if you wish to chime in at all. We've discussed various things, but I don't want to speak, for them as far as how they're going to have the garage operate.
Perhaps that's something could just be followed up on for us.
Yeah, and certainly I think that traffic management plans for game day operations will have to be looked at, of course, and we would want to work hand in hand with the both the Pirates and the Steelers to make sure that we're reflecting this new design in the plans that we have.
And then I believe that you guys maybe sent some construction phasing diagrams and stuff to me. If there's any changes to those or updates, just want to make sure we have a good handle on what occurs when and what impacts it would have, or any detouring and stuff like that. But thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks.
So Allison says, if we can't have buses because of the cycle track, it feels like you're putting cyclists against riders, even if you're not trying to. How can this project be improved to accommodate bus stops on the inner circle?
This is Darcy again. Perhaps my comments were taken the wrong way. What I was saying was, I think the question was, do we have plans to reroute and recirculate the buses in a different direction? And the answer to that question was not to my knowledge, and because that we work very closely with the city to integrate and improve bus stop accommodations on the existing side of the street in a counterclockwise fashion. And to change the circulation to go in both directions would require that we had firm, stable surfaces on both sides of the street. So I think operating in the fashion that we're operating today is working well for transit operations, and I don't think that there has been a desire or a demand to operate buses in both directions during through the circle at this time. So I guess to clarify, what I was saying was transit stops are being integrated into this project during the current configuration that we operate. However, to implement service to operate in the opposite direction would require that transit stops be established on the opposite side of the street as well.
Yeah, and I guess I would add, certainly it's a balancing act wherever we do a project, but we have a lot of users that want to use the street, that need to use the street, and certainly we're trying to accommodate everyone the best we can. Certainly there will be no decrease in service as far as buses go under this plan, but yeah, we want to be able to provide that dedicated space for bicyclists while still accommodating buses, pedestrians, vehicles, etc.
And Renee asked if a crosswalk could be added on East Commons mid-block where the bus stop is.
We can double check on that. We want to, when we look at crossings, of course, we like to provide crossings at intersections. As we evaluate providing additional crossings mid-block, we need to be really careful that there aren't other conflicts, turning vehicles, curb cuts, things like that. Generally at the intersection is the safest place to cross, especially when there is a signal there to help you across. So we, try to encourage pedestrians to head towards the intersections whenever possible, unless there's a strong need that we provide a mid-block crossing at another location.
I don't have any other questions in the queue. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to ask or comment on before we say goodnight?
Are you aware that the triangular garden planting pieces are temporary? That those are knockout panels? When the loop road was paved about the year 2000, there was already talk about changing the pattern. So we didn't want those islands to be permanent. So those are just temporary. So if you look over by Children's Museum, when they did the changes over there, they pulled that island out because the concrete underneath is complete. And so at the other intersections at Federal, at East Ohio, and at Federal on the north side, all those are temporary islands. They're just like concrete parking stoppers and then soil in the middle. So given that, do those islands need to be retained, or should they be eliminated, since they could be eliminated very easily?
Yes, so we are going to take those islands out, obviously, as we're reconfiguring to go more towards the protected intersection design. You know, I'll circle back with our designer to check on if they know about that particular situation. If that, yeah, if that proved true and there was good concrete under there, that would just it would only help us, basically. It would make things a little bit simpler. Thank you.
Well, if you look where the Children's Museum did their improvements, you can see what's underneath, what was underneath. There was a planter island there,
Mm-hmm.
and that was removed, you know, at 5 to 10 years ago.
Okay. Thanks.
Someone had asked if the city had applied for any percentage for art, for the city percentage contribution for art to be incorporated into the design.
This project, it's been in the works for a number of years now, and there is not an art component that is directly incorporated into the project. So this is kind of a meat and potatoes kind of project, I guess I would say.
I had another question about the loss of on-street parking. You know, 30 years ago, that was a 4-lane road all the way around Allegheny Center Mall with no parking. And the North Side neighborhoods had to work very hard with, at that time, what was called traffic engineering to get a few spaces here and there. And then they gradually added some more. So I'm just a little curious whether it makes sense to delete that many on-street parking spaces. It's one thing on event days, you know, at PNC Park or at the Steeler at Heinz Field. But otherwise, there's really not much traffic around that road. You know, it's sort of designed like the Indianapolis Speedway, but the traffic is really very light. And I think there's some advantage of having some on-street parking, which I know the mayor and previous mayors have worked to establish. So I hate to see you losing or deleting, what is it, 100 or so on-street parking spaces. Allegheny Center Alliance Church uses the parking. The Public Theater building uses the parking. There's a variety of people that can use that short-term parking. And so I'm wondering whether you should look a little bit harder at all those parking spaces that you're eliminating.
Yeah, no, that's I guess life is all about trade-offs, especially as we get through this design. One of our goals was to keep as many spaces as possible, knowing that we would lose some as we try to improve safety in some areas. Really what we saw, particularly going around the south side of the circle, is that especially as the Nova Place development is taking off, which is a great thing, it's also putting more demand back on that parking garage, which once again is a great thing. The side effect is that there is some more traffic trying to get into and out of the garage, and we really looked very hard particularly this was happening, last summer and fall, looking very hard in coordination with the developers there to make sure that people trying to access that garage are not going to cause horrendous traffic backups, basically. So we've looked at the traffic models and we've made some adjustments by adding some of those turn lanes on the south half of the circle there. And those are designed to keep traffic flowing at an acceptable level. It's an urban environment. It's not intended to be free-flowing. That's not necessarily desirable or appropriate for in the city, but we still want it to function. So that was definitely, it felt to me like a trade-off that we were making. We had to basically sacrifice some parking spaces down there in order to provide some turn lanes to keep the traffic at a level that seemed to be acceptable. I think, there are fewer destinations on the south half of the circle to some degree. So certainly it's a loss. It's a bit unfortunate, but it's one of those trade-offs where we got a lot of things that we're trying to balance, and that's kind of where we ended up.
Well, the post,
Oh, I'm sorry.
the post office is located on South Commons, and people do park there to go in that post office. And if you remove that island there at the corner of Federal Street and South Commons, that could give you a little extra space. I just know that people regularly park on South Commons to go to the post office.
Yeah, Ed, Mark Fatla here. The one thing I would say is, other than the post office, which has a parking lot, most of the users from the neighborhood's observation are folks who work on the North Shore downtown and who are parking on the South Circle and then for cheap parking and heading downtown. So the loss on the South Commons, less of a concern than the loss on the rest of it. I think the big place where there was a loss was at the corners where things got widened out in order to make the travel lanes safer. But yeah, there's trade-off on the neighborhood side at the conference with the committee that was, we were willing to accept the trade-off at this point. We understand it's not ideal, but two-way traffic was the paramount goal.
But Mark, if the parking is limited to 2 or 4 hours, how would people park there and walk downtown and then have to walk back within 2 or 4 hours, otherwise being ticketed?
No enforcement.
Actually, with the new parking app too, now you can do it on your phone.
Yeah, you can renew from your phone.
Whole new world.
That's true.
But
That's
yeah,
true.
thanks for your comment, Mark. And we know, certainly losing parking is rarely desirable. But as part of the reorientation of this circle, certainly in its last iteration, it was very heavily auto-centric. And I think that our goal is to try to balance that amongst all users a little better. And I guess one of the side effects is that yes, there will be less parking.
Just have a last comment from a resident in Foster Square who wants to make sure that they're still on the radar for visibility as they leave their parking lot. Cars park close to our entrance to the right of our exit, and it's often hard to see cars coming from that direction. Also, we want to ensure that our exit isn't blocked by traffic, which is going to increase when the West Ohio Street Bridge is completed.
Yes, I know that has been a concern that was expressed to us about getting out there. And we have backed up, or I guess I should say, expanded the no parking area at the intersection coming out of Foster Square there, to try to make some improvement in the visibility there. And then of course the other half of that is enforcement, which is always a challenge, but making sure people are actually parking in the legal parking spots. But yeah, we have increased the no parking zone a bit to try to add a little bit of visibility there.
And Alan asked, if the legislation passed for parking protected bike lanes, would we consider implementing it on the connections, for example, on Federal Street?
For the purposes of this project, I think we have to move forward with the design that we've worked on. For the funding sources, the 50% that's coming from the state funding or the state or federal funding sources, we need to have that money encumbered or committed to the project in the next couple months here to make sure that we don't jeopardize or lose that funding source. So we need to move ahead, and that'll probably be in advance of any potential legislation, which I hope that we see that legislation get passed. You know, as far as some of those streets coming into and out of the circle, certainly I think that down the road, you know, if that comes to fruition, there may be opportunities to investigate those things. A lot of that, you know, involves pavement markings and signage, which isn't is not too hard to adjust or redo.
I don't think, I'm sorry, for this response, for what it's worth, the door zone designs like I see in the design make me feel much less safe to ride on my bike than no bike lanes at all. Do we have any other comments or questions before we say goodnight? Right. Well, thank you all for joining us. We have all of your email addresses, so we will be sending out some meeting minutes and responding to comments and questions in there. We'll also be including a rendering of the transit stops and transit amenities and things of that sort with that as well. My apologies for the oversight on including that in the presentation. And if there's any other questions that you have between now and when that goes out, feel free to contact me or fill out the comment form that is available on on the website. So with that, I think that we will say goodnight.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.